Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Liz Picarazzi tells Jay Goltz and Sarah Segal about her first brush with bad publicity. Liz's debacle started with a negative post that appeared in a prominent local blog. It was about a Times Square pilot program for which her business, Citibin, is supplying trash bins. The problem? The bins were not being maintained properly, and there were photos to prove it. At the time we recorded this conversation, Liz was bracing for additional stories in both the New York Post and the New York Times. Both of those stories have since been published. We'll talk about them in a coming episode, and you can find links to all of the coverage in the show notes. For Liz, perhaps the biggest challenge was defending her company without trashing her client. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which Inc. magazine recently named the best newsletter for business owners, and which you can subscribe to at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Jay Goltz, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. Liz Picarazzi, who is CEO of Citibin, which is based in Brooklyn, New York. And Sarah Segal, who is founder and CEO of Segal Communications, a public relations firm based in San Francisco. The episode is titled Trash, Rats, and Garbage Juice, a case study in PR.
Welcome, Jay, Liz, and Sarah. Great to have you all here. Let's dive right in. Liz, you've had an interesting time of late. As you've informed us, you've had your first brush with some negative publicity. Can you tell us about it?
Well, sure. I can say that the roller coaster is such that the thing that I'm most proud about is the thing that I'm currently most ashamed of. And that 180-degree shift has really thrown me. So as I've shared on here a little bit, my trash enclosures are in many neighborhoods in New York City now, but most recently they're in Times Square. So it's the highest profile client I've ever had in probably the highest profile location in the world. My product is there at the intersection of 5 different corners in Times Square. And a Twitter person last week took a photo of the bins in a very sorry condition. They were very dirty. They were bulging with trash. They had garbage juice in front of them. And, the person said, "Hey, New York City, how is that clean curbs program going for you?" Which was bad enough. But then one of the reporters who covers a lot of, civic local issues related to trash saw it, contacted me for a quote, and then we ran with an article the next day about how filthy these bins were. And the news hit last Wednesday, which was our 18th wedding anniversary. We woke up to that and we're planning on going to the beach. And we did go to the beach, but we were completely freaked out and talking about this the whole time. There were other reporters from other publications, including the Post, contacting me. And it felt completely out of control. I've never had bad press, honestly. I've always gotten good press, and it's usually because I go for it. And this was something that was out of my control, and frankly, something that was somewhat warranted. It was an issue that we were aware of. The maintenance workers in Times Square are supposed to be cleaning them daily, and they weren't. They're overstuffing the bins, which is, why they were bulging at the bottom. As for the garbage juice, you know what? That's a little out of my control. I can't lie awake at night worrying about trash juice in Times Square. Yet that's kind of where I'm at right now. So that's what happened, Lauren.
Liz, you said you were ashamed. Is this your responsibility? I mean, you sell the bins, but you're not maintaining them, right?
You're correct. And the shame is not that I didn't do what I could. It was really that it is my creation and it's on display. And I'm very, very proud of that creation. And to have it in that sort of shape and then to be lambasted in the press and knowing that the Times is also probably running something this week I am ashamed because it's hard to pull apart were they serviced and cleaned correctly with how does the thing look. And I think that for the public, they may not think, oh, Times Square, they weren't cleaning the bins as often as they should. They're going to say, oh, hey, Mayor Adams, how's this Clean Curbs program working for you? Look at how dirty this thing is. So that's where the shame comes from, regardless of whether it's warranted.
Wasn't part of the problem that the garbage juice, I've just been hankering to use that phrase, I never thought I would, that the garbage juice, they took the bins out. There's supposed to be plastic bins in there that would contain it, and they took the bins out. Isn't that true?
No, they don't use bins within the bin. They put the bags in there straight. So basically all of that juice is being compacted until it's picked up and it's spilling out the front.
And did the city tell you that they were going to get this under control, or is this just beyond them?
So it's actually not the city, it's the Times Square, the Business Improvement District. So they have a private cleaning crew that handles all the trash and all the cleaning in the area. And, they were pretty appalled by this as well. They took immediate action and have shifted to daily cleaning. We went there the very next day to change the cladding from kind of a lighter brown color to a very dark gray color, which is something we should have done before.
To change the what?
The cladding, so the siding on the bins. They're these bamboo composite boards that are usually used in decking. So they clean like a deck. They clean very well, but if you don't clean them, they're going to look really bad. So we reclad them from this brown color to this dark gray color, and also are making sure that they're washed every day. So the situation is much better than it was. But, the responsibility is on this private company. And, I actually do trust that they are going to turn it around because it does reflect negatively. It doesn't look good. And the whole point of this, which is the ironic part, is to create clean curbs, which is to beautify the city and not to have it be an eyesore.
Can I ask, when reporters reached out to you, I mean, I can imagine you're in a bit of a tough situation because you don't really want to rake your client over the coals, right? For their lack of maintenance of the bins. What did the reporters ask, and what did you say?
So far, I've actually been very diplomatic. And I want to be, because Department of Sanitation and Times Square have been really good partners. And I believe that partly because this happened, we're going to be even closer partners. But I definitely did not want to bash my client. I talked about it more in terms of this is a pilot. We're working with Times Square on many aspects of the bins, including some of those that were pointed out. We're working closely with them on a maintenance plan that, may be better than where it was. And, just as a reminder, this is a pilot. We're piloting this with the city. And the point of a pilot is to gain learnings, which will make the product better. So I even said something to the effect of that I was actually glad that my bins were being tested in Times Square, because there's probably no other place in the world that would stress test it as much as Times Square. So I replied in a way that I think showed that I'm up to the task and that I do have a strong partnership with, Department of Sanitation and Times Square, but I hope did it in a way that didn't make them look bad.
Well, I also thought what you said, especially acknowledging Times Square and the stress test aspect of it, I thought you came across as acknowledging the problem but not sounding defensive about it.
So this happened on your anniversary. How much coverage has happened since then, or did it die down?
So I'm glad you're asking, because you might be able to give me some advice on this. The Post reporter contacted me the day it happened, which was last Wednesday.
That's the New York Post, right?
The New York Post contacted me. And, I talked to them for probably like 15 or 20 minutes, and they were actually asking a lot more questions about myself and my company and how I came to get my bins into Times Square than they did about like the garbage juice and some of the other stuff. So I was feeling kind of encouraged that the questioning was headed more in that direction. And I also was encouraged that they asked for like a headshot, because I thought, if they're going to like criticize me, would they really ask for a headshot? Several people have said yes, they'll still
they might
ask
do
for
that,
it.
Liz.
Of course they would. I was hoping, well, that's such a personal thing. They wouldn't be asking me for it if they were going to like put nasty
They're
words
probably giving
next to
you an
me.
or something if they want a headshot.
Yes. So they haven't run the story yet. And I actually did contact the reporter and I said, hey, you mentioned it was going to come out on Saturday. I haven't seen it yet. And he said that they're holding it potentially for next week.
So you did a lot of things right.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, you responded to the reporters right away, I assume. You're not in the wrong. It's a test program. You're not responsible for the maintenance of them. You do provide the product. And you had a statement right away. I mean, a lot of people, when something like this happens, their first reaction is, no comment. I'm not a believer in that. I believe in responding to the reporters right away, saying, hey, what can I do to help you? And providing them context, which is, I think, what you were effective in doing. And so now they're taking the story and going, okay, well, maybe there's a larger piece of this where it's worth kind of giving an evergreen story to, where it's the reporter probably wrote something that's not linked to any moment, but it's a more kind of big picture, what's being done to clean up Times Square. And that's why there's no urgency in running that story. But, you did a lot of things right. You kind of turned the narrative from a negative about your bins into a positive of, we're trying to make change and we're trying to do things. I can tell you a fun story about a client that had a similar incident this week. But we were able to kind of just have fun with that narrative. It's not apples to apples, but I think that it's kind of reflective of the fact that, this is a news moment for a day, but news moves so quickly that nobody's going to remember it tomorrow.
Yes.
What's the secret to having fun with it, Sarah? How should Liz have fun with this?
We had a client who runs a successful boutique, crafted, wonderfully delicious donut company in the Bay Area. And they have several stores. And they actually had somebody break into their corporate office, steal their petty cash. And then apparently the burglar left, realized they had left their keys or something, and came back. All I know is I get a text from the client, we have the Associated Press calling us. They're doing a story. And if anybody knows anything about the Associated Press, once you get on the Associated Press, it goes viral because it's syndicated across everything. So they're in a panic about how a happy, fun, warm brand is all of a sudden going to be associated with a crime. And so the way that we dealt with it was that thank goodness, the founder has a wonderful sense of humor. And so we worked with him to draft a couple quotes and responses that were, along the lines of, we're just happy that no donuts were harmed in the process. We're delivering, a couple dozen donuts to the officers who came to our aid. And it got picked up and it blew up. I want to say yesterday it had hit 291 pieces of coverage on that one little story.
Wow.
And it put them in a good light, right? And that's kind of what you did, was that you went, all right, yeah, it's a negative story, but I'm going to say, this is actually a positive thing we're doing. And there's room for human error in everything that is done out there. And we just need to make sure that the headline isn't the only thing people are getting out of this story.
I think you can make lemonade out of your garbage juice.
I agree.
Here's my first question. Are we sure that they just aren't using too thin of plastic bags? Maybe simply changing the bags they're using would not explode so easily and let the garbage juice out. That'd be my first question.
Nope. I've spent many hours in Times Square actually observing them and talking to them, and I see how they move quickly and they need to move these bags in and out. So I don't think any thickness of a bag would really help that much.
Here's my second thought then. I think by framing this all in, you know what? We've sold thousands of these. They've worked out beautifully, and most occasions, we didn't realize that Times Square is your local condo building times 20, and we're making adjustments. You've just now told them, yeah, they usually work out just great. And like, who can argue with the fact you didn't realize how intense Times Square was? Who can blame you for that?
I'm going to disagree with that.
Really?
Because by her saying that she didn't know means that she didn't do her homework as a business owner. Like, as a business owner, she should know that should be part of the process, not necessarily her responsibility, but the business district. They should know how much garbage is going to be going into those bins and be prepared for it. It should be part of like the onboarding process.
Right.
Except even if she knew that, she wouldn't know they'd be pushing the bags in there so hard that the garbage juice would explode. I mean, that's why it's a pilot program. Sometimes you just can't predict everything.
Well, I think that's the point, Jay. You can say that without saying, I didn't realize, we didn't figure this out, we should have thought more about it. You can just say, it's a pilot, we're learning.
Part of this is that now you're going to add it to your best practices when you onboard a client.
Right.
You say, this is not a trash compactor, don't do that.
Definitely. And, some of those learnings have led us to even question the siding that we're using. We had a couple of meetings in recent days with providers of other materials, including wraps, like commercial vinyl wraps. And there have been a couple of companies that do advertising on the side of, municipal fixtures like bus stops and whatnot that are really interested in doing something on Citibin. With that, I've kind of taken it as push it to the side. It may be an interesting thing, but I'm not going to compromise my relationship with these business improvement districts by bringing up advertising on my products. Like, that's not cool. But I have learned that there is a real estate value for advertising of these bins that people are thinking of, even if I'm not. Something like a wrap could take care of some of the dinginess that you can get if it's not power washed. But then again, with those, we're going to be testing those. Those might not power wash very well because the ink could fly off of it. But one funny thing in terms of the garbage juice, in the Streets blog article, I was quoted as saying that the problem is from misuse and garbage juice. It rhymed. And I thought, oh my gosh, I never would have thought I would have said those words. But then yesterday I Googled something that was even more nuts that I never would have thought I would be Googling. And it was wee pad for garbage juice was the search term.
Oh.
Because I was thinking about putting a wee pad on the bottom of my bins. Like, I'm taking this incredibly seriously. I'm Googling things I never would have thought were possible because I want to solve the problem.
Wee pads are generally for pets, right?
They are.
Can't you put a plastic tub in there that would just enclose it all and not let it leak out of the bottom?
It's not quite that easy because the doors have bars between them.
Oh.
So, and I don't think having, a different pan for every module would be very good from a user's perspective. But, I don't want to troubleshoot it necessarily here, but I think the overall point is that we're adapting our residential product for municipal. And we're having growing pains with it. And that's natural. And some of the growing pains that we overcome are actually going to enable us to create an entirely separate line of municipal city bins that are beefed up and tricked out with everything cities would need. So it would be at a higher price point.
Liz, you talked to us about that when you first told us about this. In fact, I think there was some discussion between you and Frank, wasn't there, about what material should be used to create these bins and how much wear and tear they would take being in Times Square as opposed to being at a residential building. Do I remember that correctly?
Yes, we were talking about steel or aluminum, and that's actually part of the test. So we're piloting steel versus aluminum for a year, and I think that's going to give us our answer.
I'd like to throw out an unpopular thought, probably, that it's possible that at the end of this, given that you've been very successful with these and they work great in most applications, that maybe you just want to say at some point, you know what, they're not appropriate for Times Square because the amount of energy, I don't know that this is a fixable thing. If the maintenance people don't keep up with it, you're just making their problem your problem. And you have a very successful concept that works in 99% of applications. At some point, I think you need to just consider, we're going to give it our best shot, but you're not the mayor. This just isn't your problem at the end of the day. And if they don't maintain them properly, why continue to put yourself in harm's way with this whole thing? Just food for thought.
Well, I don't love that opinion, but it is something that I've thought of. Of course, I have to think about it.
Yeah, it's not failure.
And I have to think about, how, like, if this turns out a negative picture of my product all the time, I think I would want to do that because I wouldn't want to tarnish my brand in the residential front where I started. These are in commercial districts. So this is where people are going to eat dinner, not just Times Square, but generally the business improvement districts. If they see something like a Citibin that maybe they at the residential level were thinking of buying, and then they see a dingy one in public, they may have a second thought about buying that for the residential. So those are the sorts of scenarios that go through my head. And, it's also something that Frank and I sometimes butt heads about because, I am the CEO, the visionary, I'm the founder. I'm always going to be many, many steps forward. So I'm going to think about the brand implication of using one color versus another color. Like I will think really hard about which color we should put on these. And he won't spend any time thinking about it. Now he's needed to, and he's like totally come around. But my position now is we are not putting anything except for the darkest color in any public spaces. And that was not a position that we would have had even 2 months ago.
I think you need to look at it like you're going to have a timeline. You're like, we will do this for 6 months, 1 year, what have you, and say, we will give it a go. And then we will make a call on this date and give yourself a hard deadline to make a decision on whether or not you want to continue with this product line, whether or not it's more of a headache than a benefit to your overall profits. It's like being an actor. What people go to New York, I'll give myself 3 years and then I'll find a real job.
Well, but I've already made it into Times Square.
Yes, this is true.
An actor comes in.
If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, Liz.
Day, though, you simply don't have complete control over this situation. So there's only so much you can do. You're not the ones maintaining them. So at some point, it might make sense to just say, you know what, it was a good pilot. We just, this isn't our business. And I'm glad you have that as a possibility. It certainly is not failure.
But Jay, keep in mind, she's got business improvement districts around the country reaching out to her because of this.
All publicity is good publicity.
Yeah. Well, and the story on this could be, Brooklyn entrepreneur adapts her residential bin for municipal use, like nationwide or international, like you name it, saying 90% of my product is solid. Maybe 10% of it needs improvement, but I'm going to use this Times Square pilot to solve that 10%. And then therefore for other bids, the business improvement districts, it could be, you know what? Times Square was our guinea pig so that you could have a better bin. That makes everybody look good, so they know any potential buyer is going to know that it's going to get more beat up in Times Square than anyone anywhere else. So to Lauren's point, if I get it done there, if I do a great job, that's going to help our selling proposition in everything else we do.
Liz, I think it's worth keeping in mind, correct me if I'm wrong, but the alternative for Times Square is they had just been throwing these bags of trash on the sidewalk, right?
Exactly.
Where the garbage juice ran free.
Right.
Well, no, I don't know that it did because they weren't being smushed. So maybe the juice problem wasn't as bad because they were just laying. I don't know. I'm asking.
They are smushed. You've seen the mountains. Right. They're actual mountains.
I have not been as attuned to garbage juice as I should be. So I don't know wine that well, and I don't know garbage juice that well.
That is how I make a living. I've got more expertise on the garbage juice front than you do.
I'm sure you do.
I can predict the name of the headline of this podcast is Garbage Juice and Something.
You're right, Sarah. Unlike Jay, I've been waiting all my life to use the term garbage juice. So you
and
might
I've
be
never
right.
heard it my whole life. So that's the difference. Because I'm in Chicago where we're civilized and we have alleys and the garbage is in the alley and there's no bags of garbage on our sidewalks. I know that's shocking.
Yes. However, Jay, do you know where the worst rat situation in the U.S. is? According to Orkin Chemical Company. Where is it?
Okay, I'm not surprised by that.
It is.
Yeah.
Is it Chicago, Liz?
Except they're in the
Yes.
alleys. They're in
And
the
it's
alleys.
not just this year. Not just this year. It's every year because I'm also in the rat business, not just the garbage juice business, the rat business. And I know that Chicago is always in the number one position.
But our rats are friendlier and they're more down to earth. They're not snobby like the New York rats. And
What kind of pizza do they like, Jay?
Do they eat
Is
pizza?
it Chicago style or
eat Chicago style. They would turn their nose up at the New York style.
Oh my
No, they
God,
eat
the Chicago style pizza, they would not be able to carry that up the subway stairs.
Yeah.
Only thin slice could do
It's
that.
a dine-in. It's a dine-in choice.
This is getting out of control. I want to move on to another topic, but first, I have one last question. Liz, you mentioned that the New York Times might be doing something about this, and I'm curious, have you reached out to them? Have they reached out to you? Do you know they're doing something? Where does that stand?
So they haven't reached out to me, which actually is a little disturbing because I would like to have my voice in it. But someone from the city government said that they had been interviewing people about, I think, the program in general.
Have you tried to figure out which reporter is doing that interviewing and tried to contact them?
I thought that would be too forward.
No, go for it.
Really?
Hey, they're probably looking for you unless you, I mean, I'm assuming you have a press email on your website, but you should for sure reach out to them. Say, hey, I know
Okay.
you're doing a story. I'd love to offer up some insights for sure.
Do you know what the good news is? The good news is people say, oh, New York's a ghost town. Not anymore. There's so many people down there. The garbage is back. That's not a bad. There's a lot of people in Times Square. Seriously. It's good to hear there's a lot of people in Times Square. I'm glad to hear that. That wasn't the case a year ago.
Problem number 2. Sarah, you've had a situation recently that you described to me where you have been struggling with potential customers who ghost you after you've done elaborate proposals for them. Tell us about that.
It's an industry problem. Advertising agencies will generally request budget to come up with an ad campaign, a proposal for their clients. PR has never done that. And I don't know that social media has ever done that. If it's a social media agency, I can't tell you. But generally, you get a potential client that reaches out and says, hey, I want to potentially use you for PR. You have an initial call. They tell you all their problems and kind of what their goals are. And then you go away and you put together a deck, essentially. And then you go through it on this. You spend an hour going through it with the client on the call, with the time and energies of your entire team. And I want to say like 20% just disappear.
Has that number gone up? Has it gotten worse of late?
No, it just feels like it. I put a lot of energy into these things. Like we audit their competitors. We put a lot of time and effort into it. We did one earlier this year where the entire team worked on it. It was a client that is totally in our area of expertise. Like we would have rocked this. Actually, I had two different clients do this, and we put together the proposal. A lot of energy, time, hours doing it. And then, our follow-ups, we would get, oh yeah, we're reviewing it. And then you'd not hear from them. So you'd follow up again and like, we're reviewing it. And eventually they just stop responding. Then you find out through the grapevine that is the industry that, another agency got it. And my question is like, you just wasted how many hours, potentially billable hours that I could have been working on current clients of our time. Don't have the courtesy just to send a simple email that says, hey, thanks for your time. We decided to go another direction, as opposed to like, me just putting out these follow-up emails into cyberspace. It's frustrating because, we all get excited about working for these clients, and we get that they're probably talking to other agencies. We weren't born yesterday. It's just where do we lose common courtesy and just communicating that we're doing something else?
It has an impact on you beyond that in the sense that you have to be prepared to take on that work, which means you need to have people available if the client calls back and says, yes, we want to do this.
Oh, yeah. And it's much harder when you're like a smaller boutique agency because if we get a new client that's going to pay us to do their consumer or technology PR, and I don't have enough people on my team, then in tandem, I need to find somebody to kind of add to the team or shift somebody over from another team. It's not as fluid for a small agency because we don't have as many bodies to service a client right away. It's just there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of stresses for sure.
I just want to be clear. Are you telling me that somebody sends an email to the person in charge and says, "Hi, Bob, it's been a few weeks since we made our presentation. We're planning out our next 60 days. If you've decided to go some other direction, we certainly understand. But could you just give me a yes or a no? Please get back to me by the end of the week." Has it been that direct to say, "Please give me an answer"? Or is it, "Hi, just following up"?
I probably haven't been that direct. I mean, and I probably could be.
Right.
Would you worry that it would be off-putting to somebody who...
Not at all. Not at all. If I was getting bid somebody, whether it's heating, air conditioning, or PR or anything else, and it's been a few weeks and someone said, "Jay, we'd love to work with you. We're starting to get busier for the fall season. We would like to know, where are we at on this? If you're not going to choose this, we understand there's, a lot of things that go into that." I wouldn't be off put at all. I'd be like, no, it makes perfect sense as a business person. I get it. People understand there's limited resources and you're just trying to give me a hand here. And I think if you put in there a sentence about, if you decide to go in a different direction, we certainly understand, to let them know, you don't have to be embarrassed by it. It's fine. We're big boys. We're big girls. We get it. I think the perfectly crafted email, I think, would get a response, I would think, versus "Hey, we're just following up." I mean, I get those all the time, and it's like, great.
I just want perspective, like, Liz, how do you follow up with potential clients?
So we mostly do it by email, and we usually only do 2 follow-ups. Maybe one will be a week after, and the other one maybe 2 weeks after. We rarely use the phone.
2 weeks after what, Liz? Is it
2 weeks after we give them an estimate or a quote. And then we rarely use phone. I think we should be using it. But our close rate is really high because we often, I guess this is like you, if you've done a proposal and a presentation, in our sales process, we most of the time have been to their property, have met them, have taken measurements, have done renderings, and have given them a formal written proposal. Maybe it is because there aren't that many competitors out there that they're not shopping around. Whereas maybe with your business, there is a little bit more shopping around. So like when we follow up, it's pretty sure we know whether, they want it or not.
Do you customize your proposals, or is it like you have it so dialed in that you're just like clicking buttons and it's done?
It's dialed in.
Dialed in.
For the most part, the renderings sometimes take more work, but that's also down to a science where we have all of the, the EPS files to throw into a rendering, superimposing the bins on their property. And that was something that used to take us a lot of time to do, but now we have someone that does it, and it's a really quick turnaround.
But you are going out to their locations.
We most of the time are, yes.
Yeah. So that's something that did change in PR and just general agency, is that, pandemic happened and then we all started doing our proposals virtually. Prior to that, it was like everybody got on a plane and went to see the potential client and talk to them in person. And I've been thinking about this lately. Like, do I need to start getting back on a plane so I can breathe on people?
Sarah, tell me about the proposals that you prepare. You said that you spend time talking to the potential client and they tell you all their problems. How far do you go in terms of addressing those problems?
I think the most of it is the competitive audit that we do. We've kind of looked at them compared to the, peers in their industry and kind of see where they are stacking up.
In terms of?
Press, media coverage, like brand awareness, all of that kind of stuff, share of voice. Where are you currently? And how do you compare? Like we've been talking to a potential client that makes special mattresses, right? And their main biggest competitor is Sleep Number, who has this technology-driven product. Looking at that competitor as well as some other smaller competitors and saying, okay, this is where they are and this is how they got there and this is what they're currently doing. This is what your smaller competitors are doing. And based on that and based on our expertise, this is what we think you should be doing. If you have a small, medium, or large size budget. So we're putting together proposals that are very specific to them and their landscape.
I think the most underused tool these days is the telephone. I can give you 20 examples of everybody thinks that email, not everyone, many people think that the emails replace telephones and they don't call, and it's not the same thing.
Yeah. I just had a thought on this too, Jay, with we sometimes talk about the sequencing of our follow-up, and it's there's proposal and then 2 follow-up emails. I think it might make sense to actually do a phone call, insert that phone call in before the first follow-up email, because the phone call will be close after that email with the proposal is sent. And that phone call could be kind of just wanted to make sure you received it. So when I was a consumer more of some sort of services, that sort of a phone follow-up after I had received a proposal did register with me more than if I was only getting a couple of email follow-ups.
I like that.
It's powerful. I think that's an opportunity to go old school.
Yeah, go old school for sure.
Is this reflective of issues in your ability to obtain clients, or is it more of an issue just, why can't they be polite and let you know?
He's asking, how's your close rate?
My close rate is pretty high. We do pretty well, but there's this 20% that when we don't close them, I'm saying that of the people that we don't close, 20% of them are just people that ghost us.
And here's why I'm asking, because we're sitting here talking about strategies you could use to get them to be more polite and respond, as opposed to talking about ways to get them to sign you up.
That's fine. I mean, the signing up part, we're fine with.
How many of them ever come back when you think they've disappeared? Do they ever just show up and say, we're ready to go?
Sometimes they'll resurface. It's a problem with the PR industry in general, the ghosting aspect of it, where it's just they disappear without a trace and then they try to come back and turn you on when it's convenient for them.
I think it's worse for that industry, for your industry, simply because if I need a heating air conditioning system, I need it. Even advertising, you need it. PR, maybe you're going to do it, maybe you're not going to do it, maybe you're going to wait a little while. That it's much more of a, are you going to do PR at all? Is not even necessarily a case of they're going to use you. So I could see where that happens more often.
There is another issue is that, and this is a conversation I see a lot in my industry feeds that I'm part of. There's a sense that some of these potential clients go out to, 10 or 12 different agencies to just literally gather ideas.
Wow. With
no intent on hiring them.
That's bad.
Yeah, that definitely happens in a lot of industries.
And so that's the service industry. You can't really do that with, things that are containing garbage. You're not going out and getting somebody's ideas because you can see, touch, and feel the idea, or furniture or framing or whatever you're doing. But when you're in a service industry, it's they're just trying to mine for smart things. And, I've always been the person, I'm going to put my smartest ideas that I can come up with, only knowing so much about the client in my proposal. But then sometimes I'm you know what? I can't do that, because what if they walk away from us and they take our smart idea? We don't have anything in writing that says these ideas are only for our execution, and we will sue you if you take our idea and give it to another agency and do it. But I've heard stories of that.
Sarah, do you ever get a client without going through a formal proposal process? You have established clients, you have a nice website, you have credibility. Do people ever just sign up without making you give away your best thoughts?
Generally, no. We usually have to go through the process of showing that we understand what they need and how we should do it. People generally want to see that. I've only ever had maybe 1 or 2 that are yeah, sign on the dotted line. But those are long-term relationships.
If it makes you feel any better, believe it or not, it's actually in the Bible the Old Testament that wasting a salesperson's time with no intention of doing business with them is a sin.
I love that.
Yes, it's in there. No, I'm telling you, someone told me that. I looked into it. It's absolutely right. I wrote a blog on it one time, and I got some people that wanted to reprint it because it's absolutely the truth.
I'll put that at the very end of my proposals from now on.
Yeah, put a little asterisk.
It would be a sin.
This is a venial sin.
Just saying, yeah.
There are businesses that have said, we're not going to play this game anymore. When I was at Forbes, we wrote about an advertising agency in Toronto that just decided we're not doing any more spec work. We are who we are. If you want to hire us, hire us. If not, don't. And they acknowledged in the article that they probably lost millions of dollars of revenue in the immediate years, but that over time, it worked for them. And they probably didn't grow as much as they would have, but they did great work for great clients, and we're very happy with the choice they made.
Well, they might not have grown as much, but their costs were less too. So maybe it worked out.
Right.
But I wonder, like, you know, if I were to do something like that, where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do these proposals anymore because they're a time suck, they're a lot of energy, and they're a waste of time if somebody doesn't sign with us. Do I just provide, here's our menu of services and call it a day? I think that there's an expectation that you're going to do the dog and pony show. And so I wonder whether or not that would have a negative impact on us, or whether people would be like, oh yeah, I get that. I don't want to waste their time. They don't need to customize something for you. I'm happy with the menu.
Well, there's no question that will turn some people off. The question is, will it be enough to make a difference? There's no question some people are going to go on to someone else, but I don't know if that's 50%, 10%, 80%. That's the question. I guess you'd have to try it out.
Not this year.
When you have more business and you know what to do with, that's when you try that out.
Exactly. Or when I ask them if their retainer is above or below a certain amount, I'll be like, all right, if they're below a potential retainer is below this amount, they get the menu. Above, we'll do some dogs and ponies.
Wait, you ask them what their retainer is as opposed to telling them what you charge for a retainer?
Well, usually they come in and you ask, you know, what is your line item in terms of your budget for this? Because they'll be like, well, we only really set aside, you know, $6,000 a month for PR. And then when you know that going in, you're going to give them a proposal that is $6,000. You'll probably add a couple things and say, but if you give us $7,000, we can do this. If you give us $8,000, we can do this. But it's customized to their priorities. So if they come to us and they say, we need people to talk about us and influence other people to buy our product, but we only have $6,000 and they're a lip gloss company, we're going to look at them and we're going to say, oh, well, we should work on influencers for you, because that's really going to be what's going to give you additional transactions and people buying your stuff, whatever, as opposed to someone saying, I have a new garbage bin company and need to, you know, increase our brand awareness. We're not going to say they should work with influencers. We're going to work on traditional media, some product placement probably. So we're really, it depends on what their goals are.
I've got a question for you, Sarah. When you get a client that definitely is not at the budget level that you would need, do you ever refer them to another company, even if it's somewhat of a competitor?
Well, usually we'll talk to them, and it's either to another company, but usually it's to a freelancer. Or we'll say, okay, you're in a much lower budget level. You probably need an independent contractor to work with you, and that's how we would make those referrals. We're not an Edelman size or a Fleshman Hillard size yet. But actually I had a conversation with a PR professional the other day who works in very niche technology. And she was telling me that a lot of their clients come from one of the larger agencies that have a minimum retainer size of $25,000 a year. So anything below that range in potential retainer size, they pass along to smaller agencies.
I think that's a perfectly reasonable. When I've interviewed PR firms, I would appreciate if they just told me up front, listen, before we talk to you, I just want you to know our minimum is X. Just tell me. And then I'll go, oh, I don't want to spend. Just tell me it's good for them, good for me. Because you never know what, it took me a while to figure out that $5,000 a month is nothing, right? It's not a lot for a PR firm.
No.
From the other side, though, it seems like a lot. It's kind of like how long a minute is, depends on what side of the bathroom door you're on. When you're paying it, $5,000's a lot. When you're taking it, it's not. So I would appreciate it if someone just said, listen, our minimum is whatever, 15. Okay.
What made you realize that $5,000's not a lot?
By talking to enough PR people over the years, I've probably used, I don't know, 4 or 5 different PR firms over the years. And I've had the independent person who's on their own. I've had the quote unquote firm, and I've had the one with the 2 or 3 people. And I know now that I'm not going to get I'm not going to get much for $5,000 a month just from talking to people. But like I said, if they would have just told me that up front, I could have saved them.
Did you ask?
No, they're coming out. They come out. They want to make a proposal. I wouldn't be insulted if before they came out and say, "Jay, have you used the PR person before? PR firm for them?" Not really. I just want to, give you. I don't know. Do you have a budget for it? Ask me. Do I have a budget? No, not really. Okay. Just so you know, our typical clients generally range from just tell me.
But you could ask. They probably would tell you.
I guess. Yes, I could now, but in the beginning I didn't bother because I didn't think it was an issue. Now I know it's an issue, so I would ask up front because I wouldn't waste their time. I wouldn't waste my time. But I only do that now because I've used some PR firms in the past. I think the typical person, a small business that hires a PR firm, they have absolutely no idea what it's going to cost.
I know. I actually just wrote a blog post about cost and kind of what our ranges are. I'm including it in our newsletter, but I'm probably going to put it up on our blog as well. I wrote a blog post ages ago about pricing, and to this day, it's still the most searched and SEO most valued article that we have on our site.
I can totally see that. There's really no way an entrepreneur would have how would an entrepreneur know what PR costs?
By asking other entrepreneurs.
Well, that's the thing is that it's hard to work with entrepreneurs.
I'm sure.
It's easier to work with an established company that has 500 to 1,000 people.
No question.
PR is an understood necessity. They see the value in it. When you work with entrepreneurs and that have never experienced PR, you're having to teach them. It's a lot more work.
No question. I absolutely can see that. And it's the money right out of their pocket. It's not coming out of a budget somewhere. I'm sure that's true. Most entrepreneurs don't have PR firms. That's just the reality. I've been in business groups with, 60 entrepreneurs. I'm not so sure that I can think of more than 2 of them that ever used a PR firm. It's not a typical thing for a small business.
No, but there's a lot of stories that come up where us PR people look at those and go, oh my goodness, they need PR.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
How about trash, rats, and garbage juice?
I know. I was like, boy, did you respond to all of those yourself? Did you have holding statements put together already? That's actually something that you should consider doing, is just thinking of all the potential things that could go wrong that the press could pick up on and draft those statements before they happen. I truly believe if a reporter reaches out to you and says, I need to talk to you about this terrible thing that happened, you need to email them back instantaneously and say, happy to provide you information. What is your deadline? And then you have a buffer. You've responded. You've put the ball into their court, but you should have your holding statements set for anything that could potentially go wrong.
I could talk to you guys all day, but we are out of time. My thanks to Jay Goltz, Liz Picarazzi, and Sarah Segal. As always, thanks for sharing.
Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN@21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.